There is a small stretch of ocean that doesn't exist on any official map, a patch of water whose boundaries no one can quite agree on. Yet its name is known across the world. The Bermuda Triangle. For decades it has been whispered about as the most dangerous place on Earth, a place where ships vanish without a trace and airplanes fall silent in clear skies. Some call it cursed, others say it's misunderstood. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. There's something about that triangle that stirs the imagination like few other mysteries can. It's strange, isn't it? A part of the ocean that isn't officially recognized as a location, and yet it's become one of the most famous regions on the planet. The stories are countless. Cargo ships swallowed whole, pilots losing their way, compasses spinning wildly. Over the years, the Bermuda Triangle has collected more wreckage and rumor than perhaps any other patch of sea. So, how did it begin? How did this invisible triangle of ocean come to symbolize fear itself? To understand, we have to go back over 500 years to one of the first great voyages of discovery, the expedition of Christopher Columbus. It was 1492. Columbus and his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, had been sailing west for over 2 months, searching for a passage to Asia. After endless weeks of open water, tempers were high and food was running low. Then, one night in early September, something strange happened. Columbus noted in his log that his compass had begun to behave erratically. The north that his sailors trusted seemed to drift, moving between northwest and northeast without warning. It was subtle, but enough to make his crew uneasy. For a sailor in the 15th century, the compass was sacred, the one instrument that stood between order and oblivion. To see it falter was to watch reality bend. A few days later, another entry described the sea rising higher than usual and, most mysteriously, a small flickering light on the horizon. Like a candle that rose and lifted up, Columbus wrote. It appeared and disappeared again in seconds, too small to be land, too steady to be lightning. To modern eyes, it could have been a meteor or even a distant fire on another ship. But in that moment, to men who believed in omens and divine signs, it was something else, a warning. That log, copied and translated long after Columbus's death, became one of the earliest known records of something unusual in this part of the Atlantic. It was here, near the Sargasso Sea, a vast, eerily calm patch of ocean covered in floating seaweed, that the legend first took root. A century later, another ship found itself in trouble in nearly the same region. It was 1609, and an English vessel called the Sea Venture was on its way to the struggling colony of Jamestown, Virginia. Caught in a hurricane off an uninhabited island chain, the ship was wrecked on the rocks. The survivors spent months stranded before eventually reaching the mainland. It was a simple case of a storm and a ship in the wrong place. But stories spread quickly. The sailors spoke of strange winds and violent seas that seemed almost alive. When word reached England, one man in particular found inspiration in it, William Shakespeare. His play The Tempest described an enchanted island and shipwrecked men haunted by unseen forces. He called the setting the still-vexed Bermuths, Bermuda. The island, even then, was already gaining a reputation. Over the following centuries, ships continued to cross these waters, and not all of them came home. In 1881, sailors aboard the Ellen Austin, a cargo ship traveling from Liverpool to New York, spotted something unusual floating in the distance. A ship, adrift, completely silent. Its sails were up, but no one was on deck. When they approached, they found no crew at all. No signs of struggle, no damage, no explanation. Only untouched cargo and food still sitting out, as if the crew had vanished mid-meal. Captain Baker of the Ellen Austin made a decision. He ordered some of his men to board the empty ship and sail it alongside them to New York. But as they crossed the Sargasso Sea, a violent storm rolled in. The ships were separated by fog and waves. When the skies finally cleared, the mysterious vessel was gone. Days later, it reappeared on the horizon, again completely deserted. The men who had boarded it were missing, and it drifted aimlessly once more, cursed with silence. It's a story that's been retold for more than a century. Some versions claim the Ellen Austin found the ghost ship a second time, only for it to vanish forever in another storm. Others say both ships disappeared together. The truth is harder to pin down. Lloyd's Register of Shipping lists the Ellen Austin's 1881 voyage as having arrived safely in New York. But the legend had already taken on a life of its own. It didn't matter whether it was true. It mattered that it could be true. And that's how the triangle works. It doesn't rely on proof. It relies on possibility. As time went on, reports of strange disappearances continued to surface. Ships would leave port and never arrive. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. The ocean seemed to swallow them whole. For centuries, sailors had always feared the sea's unpredictability. But now they began to believe this particular stretch of it was different. Then came the 20th century, and the mystery grew darker. In March of 1918, The U.S. Navy ship USS Cyclops left Rio de Janeiro carrying 10,000 tons of manganese ore and more than 300 men. It was one of the largest ships in the Navy's fleet, 540 feet long, equipped with wireless communications, and built to withstand the roughest seas. After a brief stop in Barbados, it headed north toward Baltimore and was never seen again. No SOS call, no wreckage, no survivors, just gone. To this day, it remains one of the single largest non-combat losses in U.S. naval history. President Woodrow Wilson, when asked about it, said quietly, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." Over the next 2 decades, 2 of Cyclops' sister ships would also disappear in the same region. And suddenly, the whispers began again. People started to wonder, could there be something down there, something unseen, pulling ships into the deep? By the 1940s, aviation had joined the age of exploration, and planes now crisscrossed the Atlantic where ships once sailed. But the triangle wasn't done with humanity yet. On December 5th, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy bombers, Flight 19, took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a routine training mission. Each plane was fully fueled, equipped with compasses and radios, and flown by experienced pilots. They were supposed to head east over the ocean, drop practice bombs, then turn north and return home. But midway through this flight, something went wrong. Radio operators on the ground heard confusion in the pilots' voices. "My compass is out," the flight leader said. "We can't tell where we are." Other pilots tried to take the lead, but their instruments also failed. Voices faded in and out. For hours they searched, flying in circles over the endless sea, until fuel began to run low. Their final message was chilling. "It looks like we're entering white water. We are completely lost." Moments later, contact was lost forever. When the Navy launched a rescue mission, one of the search planes vanished too, a massive PBM Mariner carrying 13 men. It exploded midair, witnesses said, but no wreckage was ever recovered. For days, hundreds of ships and planes combed the ocean. Nothing. It was as if Flight 19 had simply flown off the edge of the world. By now, the legend had everything it needed: history, tragedy, and mystery. And as the story of Flight 19 spread, the name Bermuda Triangle had not yet been coined, but the myth was ready to be born. The world was entering an age of science and technology, radar, satellites, rockets. And yet, here was a place where all that failed, a place that defied explanation. People wanted to believe that something still lay beyond human understanding. Even before the term existed, the Bermuda Triangle had already captured something ancient in the human heart, that primal fear of the unknown. And maybe that's why, from Columbus to Flight 19, the legend never died. Each generation added its own story. Each disappearance became another thread in the tapestry. Because as long as there are places on Earth we can't fully explain, there will always be people who look at the horizon and wonder, what waits beyond it? By the middle of the 20th century, the Bermuda Triangle had become something far bigger than a stretch of ocean. It had become a symbol, a mystery that refused to die. Every generation before had left its stories scattered like wreckage across the sea, and now, for the first time, the world was beginning to connect them. In March of 1918, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops had shocked the United States Navy. It was a massive ship, over 500 feet long, carrying more than 300 men and 10,000 tons of manganese ore. It had set out from Rio de Janeiro and made a brief stop in Barbados before heading north for Baltimore. Then, without a single distress call, it simply vanished. When searches found no debris, no oil slick, no trace of any kind, newspapers across the country were filled with speculation. Was it sabotage? A German submarine? A freak storm? President Woodrow Wilson could only say, "Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship." And the sea, as always, kept its secrets. Years later, in 1941, 2 of Cyclops' sister ships disappeared in nearly the same region. They too left no signal, no explanation. Whatever had swallowed them was invisible. Then came 1945. 5 Navy bombers, known as Flight 19, took off from Florida on what should have been a routine training mission. They flew east into clear skies. Radio logs later revealed a rising sense of panic in the voices of the pilots. "My compass is out," one said. "We can't tell where we are." They were supposed to turn north after their practice run and then west back home. Instead, they flew deeper and deeper into the open Atlantic, convinced they were heading toward Florida when, in reality, they were going the opposite direction. After hours of confusion, their transmissions grew faint. "It looks like we are entering white water," one of the pilots said. "We are completely lost." Those were the last words ever heard from Flight 19. A rescue plane was dispatched, a massive PBM Mariner carrying 13 crewmen. Within minutes of takeoff, that plane vanished as well. Witnesses saw a bright explosion in the sky, but no wreckage was ever recovered. By the time the search was called off, 27 men were gone. The official Navy report would later state that it was as if the planes had flown to Mars. That single event ignited the world's imagination. Over the next few years, more reports began to surface. Planes vanishing mid-flight, ships disappearing without a trace, compasses spinning aimlessly, and radios cutting out. In 1948, a British passenger plane disappeared en route from the Azores to Bermuda with 30 people aboard. The following year, another aircraft of the same model vanished while flying from Bermuda to Jamaica. Neither was ever found. Each new disappearance was linked to the same area, a rough triangle between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, an area that seemed cursed. In February of 1964, an American writer named Vincent Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine. He called it The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. Gaddis connected dozens of tragedies, weaving them into a single narrative. He claimed to have found the outline of an invisible danger zone where the laws of nature seemed to break down, where planes and ships vanished without warning, compasses lost their direction, and the ocean itself seemed hungry. He drew 3 lines, one from Florida to Bermuda, another to Puerto Rico, and a third back to Florida. Within those borders, he said, lay an unsolved mystery. It was simple, it was visual, it was unforgettable, and the world fell in love with it. The 1960s were an age of curiosity and fear. The Cold War, the space race, UFO sightings, nuclear testing, and a growing sense that maybe humans didn't understand as much as they thought. The Bermuda Triangle offered the perfect story. It was scientific enough to sound plausible, but mysterious enough to feel supernatural. Soon, more writers followed. Books, magazine features, and documentaries exploded in popularity. The most famous came a decade later, The Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz, published in 1974. It sold over 20 million copies in 30 languages. Berlitz took Gaddis's concept and transformed it into legend. He wrote about the lost city of Atlantis buried beneath the sea, its crystal energy beams interfering with ships and planes above. He suggested time warps, alien abductions, interdimensional portals. Nothing was off the table. In Berlitz's hands, the Bermuda Triangle became not just a region, but a doorway, a place where reality itself could bend. For millions of readers, it was irresistible. His book arrived at the perfect moment in history. Science was advancing faster than ever. Rockets were reaching the moon, computers were coming to life, but all that progress also left people hungry for mystery. They didn't want every question answered. They wanted to believe there were still places where the unknown ruled. And so the Bermuda Triangle became a kind of cultural mirror, reflecting humanity's fear of losing control, of facing forces beyond understanding. Hollywood joined in. When Steven Spielberg released Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he included a scene where the long-lost Flight 19 pilots are discovered alive and well, returned by aliens decades later. The Bermuda Triangle had entered popular mythology. Television specials spoke of magnetic anomalies and underwater pyramids. Newspapers speculated about whirlpools, alien bases, and government cover-ups. Even scientists began to respond, some eager to explain, others tired of debunking. But while the theories grew wilder, the evidence never did. If the Bermuda Triangle were truly deadly, if something unnatural lurked beneath the waves, then surely there would be more wrecks, more debris, more data. Instead, most ships and planes that traveled through the area did so without incident, thousands every year. Even so, people wanted to believe. They wanted to believe in ghost ships like the Ellen Austin, found empty and drifting. They wanted to believe in compasses that spun without reason, in skies that opened into other dimensions, in oceans that swallowed the truth whole. The Bermuda Triangle became the perfect mystery because it existed halfway between science and story. Scientists pointed to human error, navigational mistakes, storms, mechanical failure. But that explanation was too ordinary. It didn't spark the imagination. The triangle was something more powerful, a modern myth, built not on evidence but on emotion. It told people that the world still had secrets, that even in the age of satellites and submarines, there were places where nature refused to be tamed. Still, even myths leave traces of truth. There really are strange forces at work in that part of the ocean. The waters around the Caribbean and the Atlantic converge in powerful, shifting currents. The Gulf Stream moves like a river within the sea, warm and fast, twisting through the triangle's heart. Hurricanes and tropical storms form here with terrifying frequency, some strong enough to sink steel ships in minutes. Even the magnetic field is unique. In certain areas, compasses that normally point to magnetic north instead align with true north, a rare phenomenon caused by Earth's shifting magnetic variations. In the early 1700s, the astronomer Edmund Halley mapped these variations for the first time. He noticed that the line of perfect alignment, the agonic line, slowly drifted westward each year. In the 1800s, it passed directly through the Bermuda region. To early sailors relying on crude instruments, it could easily have caused confusion. And yet, even this couldn't fully explain the disappearances. It couldn't explain how trained Navy pilots lost their bearings or how massive ships vanished without a trace. That's the magic of the Bermuda Triangle. Every explanation only seems to deepen the mystery. But there's something else that keeps the story alive, something beyond science or superstition. It's the simple fact that humans crave the unknown. We need mystery like we need air. The Bermuda Triangle became a myth, not because it was unexplained, but because it was unexplainable in the way we wanted it to be. We wanted a story that said the world is still wild, still dangerous, still beyond us. It became a stand-in for everything we don't understand, not just in the sea, but in ourselves. The fear of losing control, the fascination with vanishing without a trace, the question of whether the world is stranger than we can imagine. By the end of the 1970s, the Bermuda Triangle had reached its peak. Every bookstore carried a copy of Berlitz's book. Every television network aired at least one special about it. And every sailor who crossed that patch of ocean looked a little longer at the horizon, wondering what lay beneath. But quietly, scientists were beginning to take another look, not through legend or imagination, but through data. They began to gather statistics, review flight logs, study weather patterns, and analyze the ocean floor. What they found would slowly begin to unravel one of the world's most famous mysteries. Because beneath the waves, hidden in the cold logic of science, the Bermuda Triangle wasn't what it seemed at all. It wasn't cursed, it wasn't haunted, and it wasn't a gateway to another dimension. It was something far simpler, and perhaps far more human. And that truth was about to surface. For centuries, the Bermuda Triangle was thought to be a place where the rules of nature stopped working, where ships vanished without warning and planes slipped quietly out of the sky. It was a story that grew larger than the sea itself. But as the years went by, science began to do what it always does. It started asking questions that stories couldn't answer. The deeper researchers looked, the clearer it became. The Bermuda Triangle's mystery didn't lie in what was unknown, but in what had been misunderstood. To begin with, the triangle itself was never an officially defined area. Its boundaries shift depending on who you ask. Some maps place its corners at Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, forming a rough wedge of the North Atlantic. But others stretch it hundreds of miles wider or narrower. Depending on where you draw the lines, the size of the triangle can range from 500,000 to 1.5 million square miles. That's nearly 1 million square miles of room for error, and that matters, because when the edges of a mystery move, so do the facts that support it. If every incident at sea within a vague shape counts as part of the same phenomenon, it becomes easy to find patterns that aren't really there. But let's assume for a moment that the Bermuda Triangle does exist as a region. What makes it so treacherous? First, navigation. The ocean currents here are among the most powerful on Earth. The Gulf Stream, a warm river of water running along the western edge of the triangle, can move at speeds of up to 5 knots, faster than most people walk. For an inexperienced sailor or an early navigator without precise instruments, a current that strong can push a vessel dozens of miles off course in a single day. To someone unaware of what's happening, it might feel like the sea itself is alive, steering the ship wherever it pleases. The skies above the triangle are no gentler. This region sits directly in the path of the Atlantic hurricane corridor. Every year, powerful storms form off the coast of Africa and grow as they cross the warm waters of the Caribbean and the Gulf. These storms can reach speeds of 200 miles an hour, generating waves high enough to swallow entire ships. Even in modern times, they leave trails of destruction across Florida, Puerto Rico, and the islands of the Bahamas. Now, imagine those same forces a century ago, when there were no satellites, no radar, no early warning systems. A storm like that could appear on the horizon without warning, wiping out a fleet before anyone could send a signal. Then there are rogue waves, rare towering walls of water that appear suddenly in calm seas. For centuries, sailors told stories about them, but few believed such monsters were real. That changed in 1995, when sensors in the North Sea recorded one known as the Dropner wave, 84 feet tall, rising from nowhere. Modern oceanography now confirms that rogue waves happen more often than we thought, roughly 1 in every 10,000 waves. In stormy regions like the North Atlantic, they can easily strike a ship broadside, capsizing it before the crew has time to react. So, the Bermuda Triangle's storms and waves could explain many of the tragedies attributed to it. But what about the other mysteries? The compass malfunctions, the magnetic distortions, the strange lights that Columbus saw centuries ago. For that, we turn to the invisible force beneath our feet, Earth's magnetic field. A compass works because Earth itself is a magnet. The needle aligns with magnetic north, which isn't the same as the geographic North Pole. The difference between them, known as magnetic declination, changes depending on where you are on the planet. Normally, navigators correct for this difference when charting a course, but there's one special place where those 2 points line up perfectly, the agonic line. Along this line, true north and magnetic north are identical, and a compass points straight ahead without deviation. In the 18th and 19th centuries, this agonic line passed directly through the Bermuda region. It drifted slowly westward over time, moving across the Gulf of Mexico and eventually out into the Pacific. To early sailors, unaware of how the magnetic poles shifted, the effect would have been unsettling. Their compasses could suddenly behave differently from one day to the next. To someone like Columbus, seeing that change might have felt supernatural. In reality, it was physics. Still, there's one question. The magnetic theory doesn't answer. Why do so many of these disappearances seem to leave no wreckage? Why does the ocean, even in modern times, give up so few traces of its victims? Part of the answer lies in the sea itself. The Atlantic in this region plunges to staggering depths, more than 5 miles down in places. The seabed isn't smooth, it's carved into trenches, ridges, and underwater canyons. A plane or ship sinking there can vanish completely, crushed by pressure, buried in silt, or carried away by fast-moving currents. Even modern sonar can struggle to find wrecks at those depths. But there's another explanation that captured scientists' attention in recent years, one involving a gas we all know, but rarely think about beneath the sea: methane. Methane gas forms naturally in the sediments of the ocean floor. Under immense pressure, it solidifies into a frozen substance known as a methane hydrate. In certain conditions, those hydrates can become unstable, releasing massive bursts of gas that rise through the water like an invisible explosion. If that happens beneath a ship, the gas can reduce the density of the water so drastically that the vessel suddenly loses buoyancy. It literally sinks in a bubble of its own making. In 2016, scientists at the Arctic University of Norway found giant craters off their coast, up to half a mile wide and 150 meters deep, formed by just such methane eruptions. Some researchers suggested that if similar pockets existed in the Atlantic, they could, in theory, explain a few of the Bermuda Triangle's vanishings. The idea spread quickly through media headlines, though the researchers themselves were careful to point out they'd made no direct link to the triangle. Still, the theory fit perfectly into the legend's blend of science and mystery. Another possible explanation for an ocean that seemed to defy reason. But when the data was finally gathered and analyzed, the results were strikingly ordinary. Researchers compiled records from maritime databases covering over 150,000 incidents worldwide between 1982 and 2015. Of those, about 9,000 occurred in the general area of the Bermuda Triangle, roughly 4%. That number matched almost exactly the global average for shipping accidents, suggesting that this region was no more dangerous than anywhere else. In fact, when Lloyd's of London and the U.S. Coast Guard conducted independent analyses, they concluded that the percentage of vessels lost in the Bermuda Triangle was lower than in many other parts of the world. A 2021 report from Lloyd's List found that out of more than 8,000 ships passing through the area that year, only 2 had reported any form of major casualty, a rate of 0.02%. Statistically, you're far more likely to encounter trouble in the South China Sea or the Mediterranean than in the Bermuda Triangle. Aviation data told the same story. The National Transportation Safety Board, which has cataloged every U.S. flight accident since 1962, found that incidents over the Bermuda region were overwhelmingly caused by weather, mechanical failure, or human error, the same factors seen everywhere else. Since 1965, only one recorded commercial incident over Bermuda resulted in injury, and that was from turbulence. Even the infamous Flight 19 case, the tragedy that helped create the legend, appears less mysterious under close examination. When investigators reconstructed the pilot's route using modern mapping tools, they discovered that the flight leader had likely mistaken the Bahamas for the Florida Keys. Believing he was west of Florida, he turned east, straight into open ocean. The more he tried to correct his position, the farther he drifted from safety. When their fuel ran out, the planes ditched into the sea. The rescue plane that vanished afterward was later found to have been prone to fuel leaks that could cause mid-air explosions. In the end, the cause was human error, compounded by inexperience and failing equipment. And that, perhaps, is the truth at the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. Not monsters, not portals, but the frailty of human perception. For sailors in the age of Columbus, it was the mystery of the compass. For the aviators of the 20th century, it was the disorienting vastness of the sea. For writers in the Cold War era, it was the need to find wonder in a world that science was rapidly demystifying. The Bermuda Triangle endures because it gives us something science alone cannot, the feeling that the world is still untamed. When we look at a calm horizon, it's easy to forget how powerful the ocean truly is. It's a living, shifting system of winds, waves, and currents that no one can ever fully control. And when something goes wrong out there, a navigational mistake, a sudden storm, a burst of bad luck, the sea rarely leaves evidence behind. That silence, that absence of proof, is what gives birth to stories. And sometimes, stories are more powerful than facts. Today, more than 1,000 ships and planes cross the so-called Bermuda Triangle every week. They do it with GPS, radar, and satellite tracking, and almost all of them arrive safely. Yet the myth persists, whispered in conversations, immortalized in documentaries, printed in books. Because deep down, people don't really want the Bermuda Triangle to be ordinary. They want it to be extraordinary. Maybe that's what makes the legend so enduring. It's not a tale about fear. It's a tale about wonder, about the human hunger for mystery in a world that often feels overexplained. The Bermuda Triangle, in the end, is not a riddle to be solved, but a reminder that for all our science, our satellites, and our data, there are still places that humble us, places where imagination and reality meet and blur into each other. So when you hear the name Bermuda Triangle, don't think of disappearances or alien abductions. Think of the sailors who crossed that sea centuries ago with nothing but faith and a compass. Think of the pilots who vanished into clouds not because of magic, but because they were human. Think of the writers and dreamers who turned a patch of ocean into a symbol of the unknown. Because the truth is, the Bermuda Triangle isn't a mystery in the water, it's a mystery in us. It's the part of the human mind that still looks at the horizon and wonders what might be waiting just beyond it.